The ceremony in the Cathedral of Monaco in April 1956 showed Grace Kelly as a picture of serenity at the altar. In reality, she later said how she'd entered seeing only a barrage of camera lenses. Welcome to this History Extra Academy series exploring the lives of some of history's most remarkable queens. Thanks for staying with us. I'm Professor Kate Williams, and in this episode, we're looking at some of the last queens in history and what they tell us about the story of women and power. We're looking at some last queens, and we're also looking at the question of queen and image. We've been talking a lot about different images of the monarch. Marie Antoinette said she had to go about like an actress. But what if the most successful type of princess, the most successful type of queen, is actually an actress? And that's what happened when Grace Kelly married Prince Rainier of Monaco. When American movie star and Oscar winner Grace Kelly announced her engagement in 1956 to Prince Rainier III of Monaco, a lot of people in Hollywood had no clue where Monaco was. One, thinking it was Morocco, reportedly asked her how she would deal with all the camels. There was little familiarity with a small sovereign state on the French Riviera. Time magazine dubbed the union rather waspishly the marriage of a blonde from North Philadelphia and the hereditary proprietor of an amusement park. But the wedding was sold as a huge fantasy, a fairy tale. The studio MGM had agreed to release Grace from her contract on the basis that they would have rights to the wedding and broadcast it as the wedding of the century. Taking place not too long after the engagement, the ceremony in the Cathedral of Monaco in April 1956 showed Grace Kelly as a picture of serenity at the altar. In reality, she later said how she'd entered seeing only a barrage of camera lenses. All I remember, she said, is that the flower arrangements in the cathedral were filled with Rolleiflexes, Hasselblads and Nikons with telephoto lenses and flashbulbs. The cathedral was a movie set. Grace also said she never saw anything fairy tale about it. Grace Kelly met Prince Rainier while she was at the Cannes Film Festival, and that winter, the prince came to Philadelphia and proposed marriage. So Grace expected to continue her work as an actress. She was still under contract. But it was made very clear to her that she was now to be married to Monaco. As Grace later said, "My husband was determined to turn me into a real princess, and it was with much patience and understanding that he showed me the way." Grace Kelly had first made her career in New York as a highly successful model. Now she was selling Monaco. The principality's coffers had been decimated by World War II, and it was highly dependent on France for everything from supplies to gas to defence. It was sorely in need of an injection of glamour that could place it firmly on the world stage. And there were various ideas about marrying Prince Rainier to a Hollywood movie star. Even Marilyn Monroe was considered. She called him Prince Reindeer. But Grace Kelly, Hollywood's lady, was seen as the perfect future princess. A year after the birth of Grace Kelly and Rainier's son, Prince Albert, in 1958, a political impasse between Rainier and his council came to a head. He wanted a budget approved. They said no. He abolished the council and called a new one. He then decided to take on France and its new president, Charles de Gaulle. Prince Rainier said that French media companies and state-owned media owned too much of Radio Monte Carlo and were poised to take it over. He instructed that no more stock be sold. This was seen as a hostile act by France, and de Gaulle said, well, in return, the Monaco people and corporations should pay taxes to France, especially those French people who'd moved to Monaco. If Rainier refused, France made it clear a lot was at stake. A customs border could be imposed, the Bank of France could refuse to lend Monaco money, imports could be halted, and most seriously of all, Monaco could be entirely cut off. France supplied electricity and gas to the principality and even ran its railway. And France would no longer defend Monaco in the event of an attack. The prince was in an impossible situation. The principality was dependent on France, but he could not afford to lose Monaco's tax-free status. He gave in, allowed Radio Monte Carlo to be traded, and wrote de Gaulle to express loyalty. Now, before Rainier's 1956 wedding to Grace Kelly, the Hollywood star, few would have cared about the struggle between France and the tiny principality. But Grace had put Monaco on the map, and English-speaking newspapers covered the crisis in full, casting Monaco as David against Goliath. World public opinion, a lot of it was on Monaco's side, and so de Gaulle agreed that Monaco should retain independence, and a plan was made about French citizens and corporations and tax. Rainier agreed to install a new constitution and govern with the council. It was unlikely that anyone in Rainier's circle would admit it, but Grace Kelly had saved them. Now, she made one request of her husband. She asked that the new constitution, following the crisis, should allow the women of Monaco to vote and stand in elections. In 1962, Monaco became one of the last places in Europe to grant women the vote. And a lot of that was thanks to a woman who hadn't been able to vote since she was in her 20s. Grace Kelly, the woman dismissed as a blonde from North Philadelphia, had become the ultimate defender of her adopted country, and she improved the lives of all women living there. Grace Kelly was not a queen. She was a princess, but she was the closest Monaco would ever have to a queen. And in a world where women were judged by their images, how they appeared on TV, being seen to be believed, as we talked about in the very first episode of this series on Elizabeth II, perhaps it was easier to be a princess if you'd already been a movie star. As Grace herself said, I wouldn't have been able to do my job as well as I do it now had I not been an actress. Queens, it seems, throughout history, can't just reign and can't just be consort. They must be the perfect image, a movie star, always in a movie.